It's the old adage, a black and white biracial child. We ain't white enough for the black folks, and we ain't dark. We're too dark for the white folks. So, but what's interesting about that is that society sees me as a black man.
Right.
Like I have here in my community, I have about a handful of run-ins with law enforcement where it was racially profiled, and in one situation I almost lost my life. I thought I was going to die that night for sure.
Mm.
So I had those experience, right, that these cops didn't pull. I was speeding. I was 7 miles per hour over. That turns into four squad cars there, guns getting pulled out on me. Like, how do we justify that, right? That
Right.
was clearly because I was a black man and I was a threat to them, even though part of what got me off was my squeaky clean record. Like, okay, I had a couple of speeding tickets on my license. My car is mad clean. I've got my college books in my book bag in my trunk and a CD case, like, or yeah, a pocket of CDs. Like, that's all in my car. Like, there's nothing. I have nothing, right? So it was a bit of a challenge to merge that. I would say, like, I had this affinity towards the black community because of my lived experiences, but I also know that I'm biracial. I have a white mom that raised me, and I wasn't raised around my black family, but yet I have older black folks in my life that mentor me, treat me as such. I'm accepted
Mm.
as such. And I'll be honest, RJ, I'll be 42 this year. I'll actually be 42 in a couple of weeks. Um, I would say probably 4 years ago, I probably came to grips with that. I know who I
Mm.
am. I know what I stand for. I know what uh, speaks to me, what resonates with me. And what's funny is that when I look back on my life as a professional, once I
Yeah.
started working as a professional, all the spaces that I've been in, it, and it happened. I know I was like being intentional about it, but I've forgotten it until now that I'm in this space and the work that I'm doing that's super intentional, especially around black and brown males.
Mm.
Um, I have diversified or bettered the cause for black and brown students. My workspace has become more diversified. The church that I was at was more diversified. Programming within schools is closing the gap, as there is a disparity amongst our black and brown students. Diversified leadership. One of the things that I didn't say is I did start as a teacher, fifth grade, third grade, became a school counselor at that K-8 I was at, transferred to our second most vulnerable high school, um, became a college and career counselor there, got promoted to the district. For 2 years, I was the only black district administrator. Uh, Now it's diversified. My boss is a woman of color, black female. One of our other assistant superintendents is a Latina. Like, it's space is being diversified. Programs
Right.
within my
Right.
community are closing the gaps for what I feel is are everybody's my people, but I have an affinity towards this because I'm a man of color, right?
Sure.
So it took me a long time to come to grips with that and to be okay walking in my skin, knowing that I'm biracial, but I'm black. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I'm
that's big facts, man. Again, I appreciate the candidness, and it's interesting the way you describe that. Um, you meant when you first started talking, you sort of reminded me. I don't remember if my father told me this or it might have been him. Maybe it could have been one of my uncles, but I remember somebody telling me that whoever your father is who you are. In
right,
terms of like my father's black, so it's like, well, you're black. It doesn't matter
right,
who your mom is or where she's from. And so that's why that was like sort of my mentality pretty much majority of my life. But as you said, there was some challenges there because you didn't always fit. And I definitely had my fair share of that. And I will say, in fairness to my sister, she's a lot more fair skinned than I am. So she had a whole lot more challenge than I did. I fit a bit more, I think, than she did, but she
yeah.
tried to overcompensate. So shout out to her for that. But but the challenges were there nonetheless, right? Trying to be enough over here and then trying to be enough over here. and not
Yeah.
necessarily knowing how you fit. And then obviously, because we're not having these conversations with our parents, not getting any guidance. And to be fair to them, it would be very hard for them to be able to give guidance because it's not their lived experience. I was like, how do you talk about it? Like my son, I can talk to him about what it means to come from a multicultural environment because I've had to navigate it my whole life.
Right.
So I can give him some game to be like, you don't have to identify with every part of you, but just know that you are a part of all of that.
Yeah.
So I think that that's important to distinguish that. But it does play a role, and it can make it difficult in how you see yourself. And I, even when you just said a moment ago about it being recent, that you got kind of comfortable in your skin. I mean, I had a similar epiphany. I'm 35. I had a similar epiphany, I would say a couple years ago. Because, like, for example, me growing up, my dad was maybe it was because of the Navy, but he was always like, you need to be clean cut, low, basically like a high and tight pretty much all the
Yeah.
time. I
Yeah.
had long hair a little bit when I was a kid, but once I got out of elementary, it was like, cut that down, keep it short. So it was always short. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that I actually allowed myself to grow my hair out because I had that notion in my mind that like it was going to be looked at as less than, or it wasn't as I wasn't as well groomed as maybe my white counterparts. And so I was kind of in my head about it. And then I fortunately I used to work at UCF, and I used to work with international students exclusively. So I got to meet a lot of brothers and sisters from Africa, from Ghana and Nigeria and all these different places, and they were very comfortable in their skin because obviously that's all they knew. And for some reason that just like touched me. It gave me a higher level of acceptance of self. And so I started growing my hair out because I was cool with it, and now I feel like it's much more me. But it took me a long time to get there because the way a lot of times the way we grow up is like, no, you kind of need to fit in more, and because you're an other, you really need to fit in. And I say other to clarify for those who don't know. When I was growing up, a lot of those standardized tests you had to take, there was no biracial, multiracial box. So I used to always draw in my own box, or you had to check other. So, not that you're not another, but back then, that's kind of how they looked at us.
Yeah.
And so it was, again, hard to formulate like who we are and how we identify and things like that. So I think and on a positive note, there are more kids now being born that are like us, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we hopefully these discussions will be more commonplace.
Yeah.
Right. Of how you, not necessarily how you fit in, but how you formulate your own identity.
Yeah.
Because right, like you said, like you might identify mainly with the white side, you might identify with the black side. Understand they're both a part of you.
Yeah.
And then, and from a society standpoint, they might look at you a certain kind of way, because if we started getting to, which we're not necessarily going to, but if we started getting into colorism, then we start saying, like, are you white passing, depending on how fair skinned you are, your hair texture, eye color. I haven't had that issue, but we know that exists within the Black community, even in Latino communities as well. The more fair skinned you are, the more European-esque you look, the easier you can pass. So then you can kind of keep that ethnic side to the side so people don't know. But I'm here to promote acceptance and encouragement for us to be our authentic selves. And that doesn't mean you have to embrace all parts of your culture because it depends on how you grew up. But I hope that people accept all the parts that made them, whether you identify with them or not, that you accept that, like, yeah, these both are parts of me and I love them because they made me. But I may be identified more over here because this is the environment predominantly that I was exposed to when I was coming up.